welcome to today's webinar on open concept floor plan considerations. By now, you should know where you are. You're here. And we're so glad that you could join us today. Just a few formalities, then we're almost at the webinar point. So just a reminder, this session is approved for one AIA LUHSW. And as you may have read while registering, this is our webinar's description. So today you will learn about open concept floor plans in residential construction. And also here are the 4 published learning objectives for the webinar. So you'll see these incorporated throughout the presentation. They will kind of outline our flow for this afternoon. So to get us started, let's begin with a background of the open concept floor plan. For this, we're kind of looking at where it began, where we've gone, and where we're moving to. So first, we'll kind of need to start with the history of what we'll refer to as a traditional floor plan. So one where our homes are divided into spaces that are rooms. So a pretty rigid system of division. And then next, we'll talk about the beginnings of the open concept floor plan when we start to see this increase in use of homes. After that, we'll discuss what defines an open concept floor plan. And then finally, we'll touch upon how its use has grown over time. So this will be kind of our background for what is an open concept floor plan. So first, we'll begin with the history of the floor plan of our houses. So before the 20th century, we really saw floor plans as closed off spaces. So walls and rooms were actually a sign of status and wealth in someone's home, that you were able to separate your home by its use and by its occupant. So often we're seeing rooms that are more for public use, like the dining room or parlor. These rooms for entertainment are typically more towards the front entrance of a home, whereas spaces like the kitchen are more towards the rear of the home. So you're able to manage deliveries, odors, and also provide heat to the rest of the house. So in this context, homes were designed to be pragmatic and to function well. They're there to do their job, and that is enough. So you can see a floor plan of a home from 1888 and what it looked like then. You'll also note, yeah, so this home was one that was also managing servants in the house. So a little bit of a different situation from what I would assume most of us are living in today. And then moving from there, in the early 1900s, we begin to see the rise of the open concept floor plan. So Frank Lloyd Wright in 1901 introduces the prairie design. So that's the image you see on the screen. So it was a semi-open interior. He uses the fireplace as the uniting point for the separate areas in the space. We also have Frank Lloyd Wright to thank for the precursor to our kitchen island. So he created essentially this workspace that would allow for easier hosting and food preparation in the kitchen. So Frank Lloyd Wright's kind of a key person in this shift towards what the open concept will become. And the intent with this too, from him, was to recognize that households' needs were changing. People who were living in homes were changing. We're seeing less servants, even in an upper class. The size of households are changing, and what they want to use their home for is changing. So Frank Lloyd Wright's designs were seeking to adjust to those changes in lives in the US. And moving on from there, so then we really see the rise of the open concept floor plan during the post-World War years, especially with the baby boom. So households are growing. They're larger households with more children, and they kind of need to manage that family in the space. This is also when we're seeing the rise of the mid-century modern style. And now we're shifting to, whereas the kitchen before, we were seeing it in the rear of the home, kind of, it's a messier place, a place that is worked in and used. It's now becoming the center for social activity. We mentioned earlier that kitchen island precursor that Frank Lloyd Wright had designed. And think about how many of our homes today, like the kitchen island, becomes kind of the heartbeat of the space, where folks gather for social events, where food is prepped and where it's served. So we really see that trend change there after the World Wars. And then by the 1990s, we're seeing the open concept as being quite the norm in new construction throughout the United States. So from here, we're just going to have a little image. On your left, we're seeing the traditional home floor plan. This one's actually from the 1920s. And the right, we are seeing a floor plan from the 2020s, which is very weird to say. But I would be so curious if all of you in the chat could mention what differences are you seeing between these floor plans? So we're specifically looking at the living room, the dining room, the kitchen areas, the more public uses of the space. Um, what differences are you seeing from the floor plans in the 1920s versus the 2020s? So I'll let you have a moment to think about that. Oh yes, garages is true. We do have those more. Yes. Dining room, shifting in different spaces. I think a thing I really noticed is that you see the walls are changing. So on our floor plan on the left, we're seeing the living room, the dining room, the kitchen. They are all walled off spaces, only joined by a door. Versus in our floor plan on the right, we're really seeing those walls are being eliminated. There's more of this flow between those three public spaces. Yes, Paul, the lack of interior load-bearing walls. So key point that we will talk about more later. So now that we've identified a few things that we've noticed, let's jump into the open concept floor plan. So a pretty general definition for this is that we're seeing two or more rooms with related uses being combined into one space. Typically, the rooms that are utilized in this concept are like the kitchen and dining room, the dining room and living room, the kitchen, dining room, and living room in sort of a great room concept. You're often not seeing bathrooms included in this because those are spaces of high privacy, and often bedrooms are not included as well, unless you're looking at a pretty small space where, by virtue of, yeah, it's a studio space, so a bedroom has to be included. So typically we're looking at our living, dining, and kitchen areas, maybe in some fashion being connected. And also, as Paul mentioned before in the chat, this is relying on a lack of load-bearing walls. So we're now relying upon beams that are structurally supporting what's above us. So for the open concept, while that might be somewhat simpler to do in new construction versus remodeling an existing project to an open concept. And then here we'll just see a few images. So as I mentioned earlier, we saw growth in the use of the open concept floor plan due to the baby boom, and really just trying to address if we have a young growing family with a lot of children, how do we manage our home physically and in its function? And also homes footprint was starting to decrease a bit as well. So how do we manage all of these pieces in tension together? So the open concept is seeking to address that. It allows for visual continuity and flexibility in spaces. Also, we're seeing innovations in construction, as we mentioned before, structural support beams that can now span larger distances, eliminating the need for load-bearing walls. So the open concept also becomes physically possible. And then, as I mentioned earlier, by the 1990s, we see this concept as pretty common practice, especially in the suburbs of the US. It's quite ubiquitous. So at this point, now the home has shifted to become this place for entertainment that is central for daily life. So now that we have a little bit of background on open concept floor plans, we're going to discuss what are some of the common uses and goals for this concept, especially when we're designing a home for an occupant. So again, painting the bigger picture, we need to first recognize what is the home, who is living in the home, understand someone's family dynamics. What is the purpose of someone's home? Are they looking to work from there? Are they looking just to sleep there? Are they planning on raising children or maybe caring for aging family members? Or is it a space for entertainment, a space for fun? And then also think about with that, if these are who and what, how do we manage that life throughout the structure of the home. So what spaces are helpful to be near each other in terms of use, what spaces are more for the public to consume, and what spaces are more for the family. So when we're looking at designing a home, these are some of the basic questions that we're asking clients and ourselves about what would create a good home design that benefits the occupant. Um, so these are a few of the considerations. So once we have this understanding, we can begin to consider, would the open concept make sense for that household? So we're typically seeing an open concept floor plan used to, as I mentioned before, to visually connect spaces. So it's offering this sense of spaciousness and an ease of movement. It can also enhance our natural and shared light across the spaces that are combined together. It also can allow for increased flexibility in our design and space use. So instead of being constrained by walls, we can use furniture, we can use floor treatments and other temporary items to adjust spaces, allowing for a more flexible environment. You can also foster a bit of a sense of community when you're able to see each other, to hear each other in these spaces together. You can socialize and entertain. Um, and also, we'll see a lot of connections with outdoor spaces. I will recognize this is less common in Pennsylvania. We do deal with winter and a hot summer. So we are probably seeing less solid walls or like a solid wall of doors connecting to the outside. But in other climate zones, that is pretty typical and common and just expands the living to the outside as well. Also, we are still seeing that it does allow for a potential for higher real estate value. It kind of offers more of a blank slate for folks, leading to a higher value. Folks still desire the open concept when they're looking at homes. So then, as we touched upon before, the open concept is eliminating the load-bearing walls that we're typically seeing that were used to define rooms. So then how are we defining spaces? I don't think anyone wants just a giant space for their house. They still want to recognize that there are different zones, there are different areas. So you can see in this design here, they're really using the furniture to zone out the spaces. And you can also see the ceiling is being treated differently between the kitchen eating area versus the living space. So there are different creative strategies that we can utilize to define spaces within an open concept so it does not appear as just one amorphous room. So a few are imaged here, and I'm sure you can think of others. If you have any ideas, please feel free to share them in the chat. But here, yeah, here again, we're seeing changes in flooring type or ceiling, maybe use of kitchen islands, peninsulas, other large pieces of furniture, and then more temporary items that can be changed, like rugs or fixtures, and other furniture pieces. So then here we're going to go through a few examples of what would typically be considered open concept. So one is the fact of a kitchen and dining area, and they're joined by maybe a common island or a peninsula. So those two previously separated spaces have now become one cohesive space. Another would be connecting our dining area with our living area. And again, here in this space, we're seeing a bit of a visual separation through the ceiling treatment, also through their use of furniture. So in this area, we're connecting dining and living. And then one of the other common uses we'll see is this great room concept. So that of connecting all three. So our kitchen, our dining, and our living room. So if you look in the top left of this floor plan, you can see that they've created this kitchen with an expanded island, a breakfast area for eating, but then's also connected with our dining room and the grand living room. So all in one space together. And yeah, they work well. So as we mentioned before, we've kind of now at this point, we've discussed the background of an open concept floor plan. What is the history of our home design? What are some common uses for it? How we're typically seeing it used in homes? And now we're going to move on to our challenges because clients are looking to you to be the experts. someone may come to you and say, I want an open concept floor plan, just because that's a word they hear and that's what they're told is desirable. But it is on us as professionals, design professionals, to be the experts to recognize who is planning to live there. Yeah, what are they planning to use the space for? And is this design style actually helpful for them? Like, does it meet their goals for what their home is? So now we're going to look at a few of the challenges when it comes to open concept floor plans to be aware of. Um, just, yeah, because while someone may want this, it may not be best suited to their preferences and their life. So a few of the challenges we will look at. So look at some physical considerations when it comes to the systems being used, the structure of the space. We'll also discuss energy costs for heating and cooling, the functionality, how the space is actually used. Earlier I mentioned a lot of the benefits, but we're gonna touch on a few of the things that can be hard. And then finally, when it comes to design and furnishings. So our first item here, we're going to look at our MEP systems. So as I'm sure most folks are aware, our walls can typically house our electrical, our wiring, our water supply, our plumbing. Our walls are utilized for these things. So if we are eliminating most of our interior load-bearing walls, it does need to be a consideration of where are these items now going. They may need to shift to an exterior wall. Will that affect your insulation and everything else that you need to consider? And also now are you now increasing runs in ways that are adding additional costs to the construction of the home? So it is a balance between the home in its function and its construction versus its aesthetics and its design. And it's also worth thinking through if this is a multi-story home, how are your floor plans stacking with each other? And what will that look like if we're no longer stacking load-bearing walls on top of each other? We're now adding an increased span, and again, thinking through the supplies and our wiring getting from floor 1 to floor 2. So yeah, an item to be aware of. And as I just started to touch on, another consideration is our structure of the space. So in an open concept floor plan, we're now relying upon stronger beams or steel to span our walls, our space, instead of interior load-bearing walls. So this could be simpler if you're starting from scratch in a new construction versus you're trying to remodel an existing project that was created with load-bearing walls. But at the same time, it can also increase your upfront costs of construction by having to bring those larger items in. Also, another item is to think about your kitchen. I feel like a lot of folks when they're designing don't think about storage as the number one thing. It's not a particularly sexy item in the home, but I think most of us recognize we need it. It's helpful to have. And if you're thinking of a kitchen that would typically be in a closed off room, you have all of those walls for cabinet space and additional storage. But if you're eliminating at least 2 of those walls in your floor plan to create an open concept, now where is that storage space going? Are additional pantries added in or space in some other way? Finally, another item is to just think about when it comes to fire and smoke, our rooms and the fact that we can close doors does give us added time if there was a fire. So just some considerations. These items I would not say are deal breakers, but it is important to balance what is the budget for the project, what does the homeowner need, what do they want, and can it be done in a creative way that still meets their needs. And kind of connected to our physical space, also our energy costs for heating and cooling can vary. So in an open concept floor plan, we are typically heating and cooling a larger space. So one, this can add challenges to temperature regulation, just to manage that larger space instead of a closed-in room. In a traditional floor plan, you have the separated rooms, so you may be able to heat some and not others if you're not using them, or just even zone your home differently. Like I live in a house with baseboard heating, so at certain times of year, some of my rooms are shut and the baseboard heat is turned off, but that would not be possible in an open concept space. Also, often one of the benefits that we'll see in an open concept floor plan is an increased use of windows. As you can see in this image here, allows a lot of natural light to come in, which is quite lovely. At least most people would think so. But that also means we have less insulation in our walls. So now we're affecting the design and the construction of the space, which then affects how we need to heat and cool the space. Um, so again, yeah, all these things kind of have to be held in tension with each other. So it really does come down to what does a client want? What is the end goal for the space? And then can the design match that end goal? Um, and then getting more into the experiential pieces of an open concept floor plan, how it functions. One of the things is for visual privacy. Uh, as you may assume, if we lose walls in a space, this does not allow for as much privacy in a space. At that point, then if you're in a traditional floor plan, someone could be hosting a meal in a dining room. They could be prepping food in the kitchen. Another group could be watching TV in the living room. And all of these groups could be doing their own thing, and no one would be any of the wiser. But in an open concept floor plan, you now have to consider all of these spaces sharing a space, and conversations being heard. So it's just a different change to the use of the space. Also, there is a risk of clutter and visual noise. Again, some of these are personal preferences, uh, and what may be clutter or visual noise to one person may be beloved and a maximalist design to someone else. So it's just something to keep in mind, how someone uses the space, how they would typically clean a space. If someone finds that overwhelming to feel this pressure to keep every space clean all the time, an open concept might not be for them. Um, and in addition to when we think of our functions, so these are a lot of our senses. So here we're looking with our eyes. Next, looking at the space with our ears. So as you may guess, in the open concept floor plan, it is all open. So sound can just travel from anywhere. So if you're running the dishwasher in the kitchen and it's open to the dining area in the living room, it will be a little more distracting than if that space had been closed off. So we're having an increased risk of background noise as we have less walls in the space. And also there's the potential then for echoes depending upon the ceiling heights and how the space is being designed. So just things to keep in mind when you are designing the space. How will sound be moving throughout it when someone is using it? Are these things compatible? If someone is in the kitchen and in the living room at the same time and they're connected, can these things still occur at the same time? And then moving from our ears, we're then going to go to our nose. One of the reasons we heard earlier, the traditional home having the kitchen more towards the rear of the building was that it would be separated from some of the entertaining spaces. So that way, if there were unpleasant smells or, yeah, anything distracting, those could be shut off and kept in the kitchen, rather than being where the entertainment was occurring. So with an open concept floor plan, that is not really possible. The kitchen, if it is open, it is there. Smells will permeate the space. And it's also worth thinking through if you're someone who enjoys candles or air fresheners in a different space, all of these smells are now mixing. Um, I don't think there's really a great solution to that. I think it's just something to be aware of. Um, when you are preparing food or if you're hosting and you prefer additional scents and fragrances throughout your space. Um, and then our last consideration, when we're thinking through our challenges when it comes to the open concept floor plan, is understanding our design and furnishings. So this is less on you. This is more on clients, the occupants that will be living in the space. But typically, if you do have an open concept design, the spaces are normally done cohesively. So the style, the aesthetic is typically blending from one to the other. which does mean you have to think through it a bit more. You can't have your living room looking like one style versus your dining area something else and your kitchen completely different. There needs to be a cohesive plan. So again, this is more of a personal preference for someone, if that is something easy for them to do, to find things that all provide a cohesive image, or if that would be something more challenging and it would be easier for them to manage just three separate rooms that have their own styles. Um, Also, it is a consideration you will potentially have less wall space for art and decor because there are no longer walls enclosing all of these spaces. So again, personal preferences for clients, but they are points that are worth raising to them. Um, and then, yeah, as I had briefly mentioned before, a traditional floor plan does allow someone to highlight their unique style in different spaces. So these are just three images that are very different styles in a dining room, in a kitchen, and a living room. And you could not mash these three together. I mean, you technically could. I would say most of us would probably prefer to not have these three mashed together into an open concept space. Um, so that is our final challenge. And if you think of any other challenges or things that you have seen in open concept floor plans that have given you pause as a designer, or you have seen homeowners regret that they've done with it, I'd love to hear about it in the chat. And we can talk about that a bit more later as well. So now we're hearing what can go, yeah, what can make things difficult about the open concept, or what are things to be aware of, to be sure that folks really understand if you are getting an open concept floor plan, what does that mean for how you use the space and how you can live in it? Let's jump to what are some of the benefits? What are the opportunities? If we, yeah, if this has become ubiquitous into the 90s, the 1990s, then somebody like people like it, and there's a reason why. So let's highlight some of those reasons. So the top three areas that we'll focus on for opportunities with the open concept floor plan. So we'll look at physical characteristics, our functionality. So again, kind of how our senses are interacting with spaces, and then also the social use of the space. So starting with our physical characteristics, we will discuss looking at the light of the space. So typically, one of the benefits in an open concept floor plan is an increase of natural light. So since we don't have load-bearing walls, we're able to add more windows throughout the space. Also, since the spaces are shared, the light between the spaces is shared. So if I have these windows, as you can see in this image, that are in that dining area, I'm still benefiting from that light in that living area. So this can also help reduce our need for artificial light in spaces, allowing us to maybe be slightly more energy efficient. Yeah, and just enjoy a space that feels light. And then related to that, another physical characteristic is the spaciousness. Um, so as you may imagine, when you were in a space that is surrounded by walls, it does feel a little more closed in. Uh, and when we eliminate those barriers, like our walls or our doors connecting the spaces and open up the space, it can offer this sense of spaciousness, which typically people would associate with a more inviting space. It also can allow us to more efficiently use our space. If you are in a smaller home, sectioning off the rooms can make them feel smaller versus we can kind of open up the space, make it feel a bit larger, with an open concept and use less square footage. So here we just see an image of a home that has the kitchen, the dining, and the living room all together. And it feels pretty open to me. And then next, we're kind of going to move into, yeah, how are we sensing the spaces? How are we experiencing them? So with an open concept floor plan, there can be a bit more functionality. So whereas with our traditional floor plan, we're relying on load-bearing walls to define our spaces, in an open concept floor plan, we can rely more upon furniture or movable pieces. We can rely upon other ways to change our spaces. This can make remodeling or changing other things easier. Um, and I mean, in the end, I think we can recognize it's easier for us to add walls to an open concept floor plan than it is to remove load-bearing walls that we touched upon earlier that may contain electrical or other infrastructure needs, because then you now have to think about how to reroute those. Whereas instead, you can simply add the partition walls here to the open concept. So in this image, we're seeing just a little cubby shelf being used to separate the eating area from the living area, but we're still seeing the natural light being shared across the spaces. And then additionally in our functionality, how we move throughout the space, open concept floor plans can offer an improved sense of traffic flow. So for this, people are able to move about more freely throughout the spaces. Again, when you're thinking with clients about how they use the space, like what is it for, this is really helpful for places where you're hoping to gather a lot. You're hoping for lots of movement between the spaces. You're hoping to entertain. It's pretty easy, as you can see in that left floor plan, to move between the living area and the kitchen and the dining area. There's just a nice flow throughout those spaces to use them well, and then the same on the right as well. Um, it allows for ample room for movement and use between all of the common areas at the same time. And with that, that also offers the potential to consider visitability and accessibility when we're looking at our homes. So our increased flexibility in our spaces allows us for some additional freedom of movement. So it can make it a bit easier to think through, okay, if someone is now using a wheelchair or has some other a device that they need for movement, furniture can be arranged in such a way that they can get through, whereas it's a little harder to change a doorway to widen that than to just move a piece of furniture. So if an open concept floor plan is used with intention, it can allow for uh, greater use and greater ability for all types of folks to live within that home. So in this floor plan here, you can see that was intentionally designed for folks who would be in a wheelchair to be able to navigate the space well, to have full freedom of movement where they need to, and still allow the space to be rather functional. On the right-hand side, you'll see the open concept nature of the space. So we have the living area on the top, the dining in the middle, and the kitchen at the bottom. So again, it's using the open concept in a way that allows someone full use of their home, but also still full functionality for any other purpose they wish, whether it's entertaining, caring for family members, and just, yeah, appreciating the benefits of an open concept. So this can be useful to think through if you're thinking through aging in place or considering having different family members or other folks become a part of your household that may have these needs as well. And with that, we also see an increase in our visual connection of spaces. So now we're moving a bit into our social use. So again, this is less about you and your construction and your process, but it's more, what does the client really want out of their home, and how can you meet that through design and construction? Um, so an open concept floor space allows us to gather in groups while still feeling connected. So you can see some images here where there's a party happening. Someone can be socializing in that living space. They can be around the counter, and they're all still together in that same venue, rather than being separated into a specific dining room where people are there eating or the people prepping food and they're now separated from the rest of the party. And then also the fact of on the right, we see there could be kids working at a table while an adult is there in the living area, maybe doing their work. It provides an opportunity for us to have kids managing this to be throughout the space. Maybe you're caregiving for someone else. So it does allow that sense of visual connection throughout the space, which can be of benefit to some households. And with that as well, we can add a greater ease of communication across spaces. So if you could be on one side, you may be able to still talk to someone that's in the other side of the space instead of having to navigate from one room to the other. And continue to have this back and forth in ways that can be challenging, especially if you're hosting or if you're in the middle of something. It's much easier to make a visual connection with someone and to indicate a need. This is also helpful for folks when we think through folks speaking ASL, or yeah, just folks with different abilities using spaces. That greater sense of connection where whether it's visually, through audio, it just allows us all to better participate in our spaces. That said, it can also make it more challenging. I should have touched on this a bit more, the fact of there can be additional background noise, and that can also be challenging for folks with different hearing abilities. So again, as you've heard from pretty much every part of the open concept floor plan, there's a benefit to it, but then there's typically a corresponding drawback to it. So the importance is to really understand how is someone utilizing a home, what are their hopes for it, what are their goals for it, and then which of these pieces is the one that makes more sense for them. Um, so now we're kind of going to discuss briefly what is next for open concept floor plans. You may be seeing articles recently that are saying the open concept floor plan is dead. It's not what people want anymore. Um, I would say property values and resale values don't indicate that, but it's still a thing people are discussing. So we've already touched upon their challenges and opportunities. So now we're going to kind of touch upon how is this concept shifting today. Um, so we have started to see sort of this evolution to like an open-ish or a hybrid concept. So this is where we're still seeing spaces like our offices, children's play areas, utility rooms, those are closed off. So areas where there is either maybe a higher level of noise or a higher desire for privacy, they're still seeing those being closed off and potentially an open connection still between a kitchen and a living space. But now we're also introducing some more visual divisions um, that are more temporary, such as like a pocket door or barn door. So space can be closed off when it's needed, but then it can be opened for the other times, or more even just oversized doorways. So then there's still a visual connection between spaces, but still a pretty clear delineation between like this is a dining space, this is a kitchen space, and also the use of a half or a pony or a knee wall, other things that can kind of create a visual separation between two areas. And this started to really reemerge as well during the pandemic when folks were stuck in their homes. I think a lot of people realized the open concept is great for certain instances, but if we're now all trying to work together at home, we kind of all need our separate areas to work. Or it also does feel nice to maybe have a different space for working versus eating and gathering versus relaxing. So for some people, a fully open concept can be overwhelming. It allows, we touched upon earlier, too much visual clutter, too much noise. So some of these ideas offer solutions to try and mitigate some of those concerns. So here in these examples, we'll see on the left, so simple barn doors used to separate the kitchen from the dining living space. So maybe you're hosting, your kitchen has now become a mess. You can just close that and host out there. But maybe the event is also, the kitchen is a part of the process. Everyone's there to participate, so you can leave that open. And then on the right image, we want the sense of connection throughout the space, but we also do want a little bit more privacy. So they use this partial wall as kind of a solution to that. And then finally, I just want to show one of my favorite examples of a hybrid concept. Growing up in my Gram's house, it had this open kitchen and eating area, which you see in the top picture. So we could all fit, we can all gather together. But then in the lower picture, you can kind of see in the background, we have these pocket doors that close off the dining room and what we would call the great room. So when the adults need some time away from the kids, there's a way to close it off, but then when we're all sitting and eating together, we can still see each other and leave that open. Um, so I think if you're taking away uh, anything from today, it's really understanding that the open concept floor plan has a place. It comes in a variety of shapes and forms, and like our homes, there's no design that fits all. So it's on us as design professionals, as educators, as builders to understand what does someone want for their home, who will be living there, who will be using the space, and what will they be using it for. So these are really important questions to ask as early as you can in the process. Um, and yeah, if this is something, if you're a custom builder, so again, you're considering how the home will be used for the residents. If you're more on the production end where you just have set plans, do you have an open concept floor plan? And if not, what style of home are you using to suit a client's needs who would match these needs? So maybe someone who wants a lot of gathering space, who wants a space where they have visual connections throughout different areas, maybe because they're caring for a child or a parent or someone else, but they want to have that open feel and that connection. Um, so yeah, I think those are all of the key points. And if there are any questions, sorry, I have not been looking at that. Uh, that is the bulk of today's webinar. I hope this provided some helpful information to you, and even just things to consider more to look into when you are designing your house. Houses for folks, you want to be sure to understand what are the challenges of an open concept floor plan. We touched upon some of the structure, some of the sense challenges when whether it's odors or acoustics, or just visual clutter. Um, and then also how that's affecting our construction costs. And then we kind of see the opposite, how those pieces are all played into as benefits. So having increased visual connections in spaces, having that shared lighting throughout spaces. Um, so what it comes down to, it's on us as professionals to understand our products, what we can do, what we can build, and how much that costs, and then be able to understand the client's needs and articulate that into a design well, so that the home is a place that they love, that they care about, that has meaning to them.